Our next session is called Lights, Camera, COVID, and it'll take a hard look at how the world of cinema and movies has been irrevocably affected by COVID-19. We have with us Geeta Aravamudan, who is a journalist and author, and interestingly, the first woman reporter of Bangalore. She's also the author of multiple novels, winner of the Lardley Award for Gender Sensitivity, and co-author of ISRO, a personal history with her husband, Aravamudan. Thank you for joining us, Geeta. We also have Manish Mundra, who is the founder of Drishyam Films, which produced international award-winning films such as Masan, Newton, and Ram Prasad Ki Tervi. He's an avid painter and writer and has also authored 2 volumes of poetry. Thanks for joining us, Manish. Next, we have Niranjan Thade, who is a graduate of India's premier film school, FTII, Pune. He's extensively worked as a producer, director, and developer and writer of films, documentaries, and TV serials. Currently, he's Dean of Academics at LV Prasad Film School. Thank you for joining us, Niranjan. And they would be in conversation with Roohi Dixit, who's an award-winning filmmaker and co-founder of production house Zero Rules Films. With that, over to you, Roohi.
Just want to know if you all can hear us. You can hear us. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I think it's a great pleasure of all of us to be here for the 10th edition of Bangalore Lit Fest. We are here with, as they were introduced, esteemed people, Geeta, Manish, and Niranjan. I think before I begin, I would just like Geeta and Manish and Niranjan to just introduce yourself as you see yourself.
I'm Geeta Aravamudan, and I'm a journalist and an author of several books. But I'm here now basically because for quite some time I used to review films and also write about films and actors and so on. And so, in fact, once when I was talking to Shiny, I said, why don't we have a session on how COVID has changed filmmaking? And that's how this came about, actually. And I think it's a very interesting theme, and my co-speakers are going to have a lot to say about, how it has changed the whole entire process of filmmaking, how ideating about films, and generally, the way in which films are shown to people. So I think this is going to be an interesting session, and I hope you have some questions at the end of it, which we would like to answer. So, yes, Manish.
Thank you. My name is Manish. I'm a human being who is trying to take through this journey on Earth, making most of it. And film happens to be one aspect which I'm very much passionate and interested about, and always love to talk about films. Thank you very much for having me here, and love to see you all here. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Niranjan. I love films. I got into films very accidentally, where my father said that go and study films, because he thought that the studies that I was doing in my BCom, I was failing there, and I was more interested in filmmaking, the photography, the dramatics, and things like that. So I landed up in films, and I've started loving films so much that now I've graduated to teaching them. I have few of my students here in the audience, and I really feel good about that. What I'm doing right now is, in these days, is I'm sharing all the knowledge that I've collected in past 40 years of my filmmaking career, in which I've done production, cinematography, editing, direction, script writing, all kinds of stuff. And I'm sharing them, and I hope that kind of helps shape up the new generation of filmmakers. Really being nice of Bangalore Literature Festival to invite me. Thank you.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much. So let's begin with this question or quest, I would call it. With this couple of years of the pandemic and COVID, do you think there has been some sort of a creative awakening amongst people? Do you think there has been a sort of a creative awakening amongst people in the way that they deal with their relationship with creativity in everyday life? be it cooking, be it painting, be it making films, be it writing. And it's not just people like us who are in the creative field, but everyone. Do you think, what are your thoughts about that? Do you think there is a shift?
Shall I answer?
Yes, please, Geeta.
Yeah. Definitely, I think the entire creative juices have been awakened. Partly, I think, because we have been forced to live with ourselves for a long time now. Can you hear me? Because this mask sometimes masks things. So,
Can we actually take off the mask?
okay, can you hear me? So what I feel is, because we have been kind of forced to live with ourselves, think out of the box, they do things which we have never done before. And this particularly is so in the field of films. So, there are two films which particularly impressed me about the creative awakening. I'm just using it as an example to show you how film making gets creative. One was, they are both Malayalam films. And as you know, Malayalam films generally have been quite out of the box, they've been quite different. The one called See You Soon, which was written and directed by Mahesh Narayanan and had Fahad Fazil, Rohan Matthew, and Darshana Rajendran acting in it. It was what they call a single screen film, It's called Screen Life. I mean, it is not something, it's not a new kind of film making technique. It has been there for a long time, but it was the first time it was used in India. And I think it happened because we were forced to not go out and take a film. So the entire film is on a computer screen. And yet he managed to make a thriller, an edge of the seat kind of thing. And this was one of the first films which came out post-COVID. So all the action takes place on the single computer screen. And it's a very complex plot about a girl and a mysterious girl, and who she is and how she is kind of, they track her with computer hacking. And entire film was shot on an iPhone. So there are three levels of creativity here. Creativity in terms of script, creativity in terms of genre, and the way in which the film was shot. That was one film. I'm sure many of you have seen it, so I won't go into details about the movie, but it is what I thought one of the first time I noticed how greatly COVID has changed it. Another film which I saw was Sunny, which came out in 2021, September. And the director was Ranjit Shankar, and it had only one actor in it, which is Jayasuriya. And Jayasuriya was a person who came back from the Gulf, and he was in quarantine in a hotel in Cochin. And the entire film of 1.5 hours never moves out of that hotel room. It's only what he sees in the hotel. His perspective is only what he sees outside his hotel balcony. And for 1.5 hours, that the film manages to keep you completely connected with this one person and his perspective. And over the period of time, before he's actually released from the hotel, he's not released actually. I mean, when he moves out of the hotel, you know his entire story and why he is what he is. Now, this is, I feel, very creative, partly because it holds your attention all through with just one actor, one perspective. Now, think of all the old films which we saw. I've even seen Tamil films in which there is a whole bevy of dancers dancing around a first night scene in a bed. I mean, that was the kind of panoramic views that we had. That was the kind of movies that we had. Now, this all shifted out. Much of this dancing and Ghana, Nachna, much of it is gone. I mean, they're all very kind of compact films now.
So Geeta, you would say that there has been a sort of creative awakening amongst
Yes.
people, definitely filmmakers,
Yeah.
but also amongst, people who want to lead more creative lives,
Yeah.
because of the pandemic. And it can translate into filmmaking as well, as you just pointed out. Manish, what would you say about that? Do you think there's been a creative churning because of the pandemic?
Yeah, sure. This pandemic for last couple of years have been really turbulent times emotionally for almost all of us, going through those fears, going through that unknown. One or other of our relatives going down and unexpected deaths being seen, the visuals on the TV. We all locked down and it was tough time. We all, till the vaccines did come, and almost like 12 to 14 months, we were living in that atmosphere where we never knew what would happen. And slowly and steadily, when things started becoming more clearer and we started knowing about the whole virus, we stabilized, but then it had an impact. I don't know, but I know myself, I know many people around me who were emotionally impacted, both from the point of view of being locked down at one place, unable to help people, and seeing relatives and close ones dying. That was one of the toughest thing. I think we in our generation would always carry this mark in our heart. And that also has evoked so close touch to death. And when somebody, generation like us, we were not so close to death. We didn't see much war. We didn't see much of these pandemics. So when we saw through this, in fact, we came very close to death and we could understand the value of life. When one goes through that process, they are ready to take more risk on one side. And they, of course, go into hibernation. But when they come out, they are ready to take more risk. They're ready to take more challenges. And that happened also from the point of view of viewership. Viewers became more bold. They wanted to see more exciting stories, more interesting stories. And they were suddenly open to various OTT world, seeing world content. That has also changed a lot of our viewers. And that, of course, will have an impact to the filmmakers like us, to creative people like us who will have to take up this challenge to now come out with content which not only works under the restrictions of the COVID, which is there in terms of developing and filming the content, but also getting audience with cinema hall almost dead at the moment, and TV screens becoming big and people preferring to stay back at home and watching. And you are competing with world global content, and suddenly you find yourself very, facing those challenges which you were not prepared for. Probably you were prepared for another 10, 12 years to work upon and to expose yourselves with that. So on both sides, from the viewership point of view, they need more interesting content. They don't need the garbage and the gas, which they used to be. They're not much worried about the stardom, because another aspect which fell during this period was the stardom. People actually thought that those heroes were fake heroes, and probably that has gone inside their heart, and they are not ready to back a film just because it has a star or stardom. So that's another challenge, and that gives way to a lot of creative aspect which we think would help us to develop some excellent content, as ma'am pointed out, and Malayalam has been forerunner in terms of content, spreading the content for Indian cinema. We think the same would happen in Hindi cinema and so on and so forth. So I think it's of course, it was a challenging time. We all have gone through that mentally, but it will give birth to some interesting times with some deep content.
Thank you. Niranjan, I had a question for you. Since you're an educationist, also a filmmaker, you've been in the industry for so long, you have seen so many shifts, right? Like as we were talking, from film to digital to
digital.
yes,
Mobile.
becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. My question to you would be regarding the content. So now the time that we are in at the moment is supposed to be like, this is the time when maximum amount of content is being generated. Like anyone can create content, even a 2-year-old, and many 2-year-olds are great stars, internet stars, as we know that. As an educationist, when you look back at the sensibility of cinema and the sensibility of thought and idea and having to say something that can change the world, what are your views about that? How do you think this churn, pandemic churn has, brought out this content, this, huge wave of content? How do you think that's going to affect our creative sensibility in years to come?
Okay. See, there are two things. One thing is filmmaking per se. And one thing is how the COVID pandemic has affected filmmaking. When we talk about filmmaking per se, my first question when my students come to my film school is, what is a film? Film that you see, okay, it's there in hard disk, wherever, kind of there on TV, it's there in the movie screening. So I said, where does this happen? Where does the film happen? Is there in the hard disk, so is it happening there? No. You go into a cinema hall, it's not happening there, only when the projection puts it on. So they start thinking, and what happens is that starts a process, basically trying to understand what is filmmaking. Filmmaking is something very, very similar to how we read books. The books happen in our mind. Films happen in the viewer's mind. And they happen differently in different viewers' minds. So if there are, say, about 100 people here in the audiences, each one of it is going to take my sentence differently. So it's happening there. Same thing happens with the films. And it happens. And even Roger Ebert has said about some of the films that I saw this film 20 years back, and it's a different film today. While as the celluloid on which the film was made, the soundtrack which was recorded then, which was finalized, the same thing, it's there in the cans, you project it. So what changes? What changes is that mind which is watching that film. And now we come to the second part, that's the filmmaking. So the basics of the filmmaking is the film happens in the viewer's mind, differently in different viewers' mind. It's just that's why these formulas and things like that, which were said to be working and things like that, earlier, before the kind of communication ease that we are finding ourselves in, those things are not going to be relevant anymore because communication has become so easy now. That's why, like Geeta ji said about, that see you soon film. It's happening on communication, which are happening on, say, mobiles and being seen on the big screen TV. And COVID has facilitated this whole give and take of technology. Why? Because people started staying at home. There's no more films going out. No. Films at home on TV, on computer screen, on mobile screen. So this whole year of lockdown has changed that perception. People have adapted now to watching films on smaller screens. Some people have theaters. They have projections. We in our classrooms, we have projections. Like we don't watch it on small little TV screen. So you can have a projection, but at the same time, the whole experience of like how we are sitting around and kind of talking around, that somewhere has got much more reduced because of COVID. The social aspect of film viewing. And so the subjects have started changing. And I think it's going to change even more because technology, as I was discussing with Manish, and is such a prolific kind of a filmmaker, producer, that with the advent of, mobile phones, Soderbergh has made a film on iPhone 13. It's released, and I saw that film. It's there on the net. You can see it on movie. And pretty effective. And it's just that small little camera, you can keep it next to your chair and shoot. So the entire language of filmmaking is undergoing a change. There's a lot happening around here. And well, as an educationist, I'm trying to keep up with the times and pass them on.
I'm sure you're doing a great job since many of your students are here. Geeta ma'am, since you spoke about see you soon, and we're talking about how so much of our population shifted from going to the cinema to sitting in their house on the screen, all kinds of screens, and watching films which are made on screens and at the time of pandemic. So it would be, I would say that OTT boom has really taken up through the roof during this time. I don't know if it's good or bad, judging by the content that has been coming on, apart from, few content that you speak about, the kind of content that appeals across genres and has some sensibility. But here's what I would like to ask you. You think that with this opening up, like it's a floodgate of content suddenly, there are so many OTT channels, there people are making all kinds of stuff. Do you think after this wave settles down, there's going to be a channel for, minorities, and is there going to be a channel for inclusion, more inclusive stories, more stories by women filmmakers, more stories by people in minorities? Do you think it is opening up a channel for, because, why I'm asking you this question is, and I'm sure next question will be directed to Manish, is also because the kind of theatrical releases that we're having now or are going to have in future. So is it a good thing or a bad thing? And do you think there's going to be more content and more voices? Can we hear more diverse voices? Do you think that's going to happen?
Yeah, good question actually. And I was just thinking also, as you said, that not only OTT, even in my profession, which is journalism, the internet has opened up so many opportunities, but they're not all opportunities which are going to pay you well or going to, so what happens is, yes, the world has opened up, but also the world has closed in. So, it's much more of a challenge. And another thing is that, as you say, like for instance, people who review films, previously they were a snobby lot who would, look at the films and their views were like, they were very strong in their views and they would be able to influence the people to a certain extent. Now, things like Facebook and, Twitter, leave alone Facebook, I think that, like the kids say, that's all outdated. So it's like Twitter and other social media. And everyone has a voice there. People who would scribble notes on or just, talk, gossip on the roads, they are also able to make, give big this thing. They are able to make comments on the technicality of the film, whether the music was good, whether the story was good. So what has happened is it's given a voice to everybody, and everybody feels, every single person feels he or she is being heard. So that even the reviewing of films and how are films rated, it's no longer by what you do see people giving 5 stars, 4 stars and all, but it's more like 20,000 likes or so many, the thumbs down and so on. So it's a very complex world now. Everyone has a right to have an opinion. Everyone with a camera, if he has a creativity and ability to access funds, can make a film. Even my little granddaughter, who's 6 years old, knows when to mute her teacher, put on the, put on the video and all that. Kids learn so early. So by the time this COVID thing is over, and it's not going to be over so easily, OTT will be well established. The Twitter crowd and the 20,000 likes and 20,000, nothing, millions of likes and millions of dislikes and all that is going to be well established way of life, in life of a film also. So everything is changing, and I don't think it's a temporary change. I think it's a permanent change that we are going through. Remember the time when there were silent movies and an orchestra had to sit there and play music. Where did we come to when music became, I've interviewed, music makers like Ilaiyaraaja, Rahman and all of them. I've interviewed dance directors. All of them had a big thing going. I remember one old lady came and told me, you know, I was a dancer when I was young. Now I'm going to agitate for giving old ladies a chance to dance in films. Now that poor old lady won't have a chance. Even young dancers don't have. So things have changed a lot. Are they for the better or are they for the worse? It really doesn't matter. What happens is happening. And I think the whole movie scenario, whole writing scenario, our whole life is changing and we have to accept it as it is. I mean, this is an old woman talking, but this is how it's happened over the 70 odd years that I have lived. It's changed so dramatically that I can't even say that, this change was for the better, that change was for the better. It's there and it's going to continue changing.
Right. Manish, just to ask you once more, do you think with this new wave of OTT, there is more chance of hearing actually inclusive voices, voices from minorities, voices from women? Is there place? Because why I'm asking you this question, as I was telling Geeta ma'am, is that theater and what is going to be shown in theater and how many people go to the theater, as is my understanding, theater has suddenly become a place for extravaganza. I mean, James Bond started the trend coming back after, it was a late release, 2 years. We waited for 2 years to release it to the theater. And a lot of people went to the theater to see it. And people were saying they wanted to go to the theater to see it because it's a large film. It's a large canvas. So a bit like opera, right? Like you go to watch an opera because it's an experience, right? So do you think theater is going to become like that? Part of my question number one, is theater going to be, is it going to be a place where only certain kinds of films will be shown? And secondly, with the emerging OTT platform, I know we're not there anywhere near that yet in terms of content and the kind of content we are all consuming. But is there going to be a time when there's going to be, we can see more inclusion, we can see more diversity, not just in subjects, but also like people who make those films, filmmakers? So my 2-point question.
Two things. One, of course, cinema is going to stay. The form of entertainment is going to stay no matter what. It's going to stay, number one. Number two, change is always inevitable. You can't stop change.
Manish, can I interrupt you just for a minute? I absolutely agree with you that cinema is going to stay. What I feel is what is the kind of core of cinema, that is the storytelling, which has been around with humankind since ages and ages and ages. That's going to stay. Second thing that's going to stay is the creation of the world, which is connecting to what you're talking about. The world that you create. Do you create a world for the small screen? Do you create a world for that big screen?
Yeah.
These two things will stay, and he's absolutely right in saying that, yes, cinema will stay. In what form is to be decided by all of us.
Yeah, no, because change is inevitable. Change is inevitable, so things would change. I'll just give you a quick example. In terms of number of screens, India has some 4,000-5,000 screens, and China would have more than 30,000, 40,000 screens. I'm talking pre-COVID era. So we are far, far behind in any case as compared to China in terms of screens. So hardly 50 or 60 big films could release in a year because there was no screen space for releasing, and that's why there was a need to have larger number of screens. But with COVID, this has changed. What has happened is bigger screens have come into the home, and instead of going to the bigger screens, what we were targeting to have another 30,000-40,000 screens in India, what would happen is there would be a digital revolution, which we all are working on, to be very frank, to create theaters at your backyard, 20 seaters, 30 seaters, 40 seaters, and which will stream the films of your choice. You can create your own shows. You can create all those things, which we are working on. That's going to change the whole cinema viewing experience. That's on the viewing side. On the content creation side, taking up your point of all inclusive, all the subjects and all. The other important thing which has happened is creation of content has been demystified. Earlier it was like, oh, making a cinema, you need to be somebody, a god. You need to have some virtues, some money, some power to even think about creating content, which has been demystified. That's number one. Anybody can make film. Anybody can think about a subject, go ahead, shoot it. That's number one. Number two, the rules have been brought down. 1/3, 2/3, 1/2, 2/2, dark, light, all those rules have been brought down. There are no rules. It's freestyle. Go, what do you want to do it. That's why people like me who have master's degree in business, who've been corporate life all throughout, not only produce film, but I just recently directed a full feature film without even going for a film class for 1 hour. So it's possible. And that's why it's possible, because the rules are gone. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry how this angle, this set, this has to look like. Go with your heart, go with the idea of telling what you want to tell. And that will help to mushroom more filmmakers, more bold filmmakers who are hitherto holding themselves back because if their content would be accepted or not. That's on the creation. And then the third aspect is just not OTT. What we are not registering is instruments like YouTube, which is even free. You know, you make a film, you make a documentary, make your ideas, load it on the YouTube and make it as a business machine and create more and more content. Instagram stories. There are people who are making films on Instagram. So the point I want to say is it's going to change. The way we view it is going to change, but cinema will live. It will metamorphosize into something more interesting, more bolder, more inclusive, and has given and empowered with the phones which are upgrading the cameras day in and day out. You will have a powerful instrument in your hand to create your own stories, to enact and act and write and tell to the world what you want to tell. And people all around the world will view it. And that's the reason why we see everything which is interesting goes viral. Instantaneously, one night you create a content of 10 minutes and the whole world loves it and you are a hero. So that's the power you also have on your hand, which makes you fearless. So once filmmaking with the flexibility of no rules and the act of fearlessness and the power to create your own story comes to be here, you'll see some unbelievable stuff. That's my view.
That's really hopeful.
Wow.
That's really, really hopeful. And we really hope that everybody who's here today and who's into watching films and enjoying films and making films
Feeling
really
inspired.
takes that home, because this is fantastic lesson and there's great hope in it. Niranjan, question for you. As Manish was also talking about the kind of content that has come out and how there's space for everybody. My question to you would be that what we are also seeing emerging is an idea of personal branding, self, personal branding. So that idea of personal branding is a genre of filmmaking in itself, right? Since you're also teaching students and your students make films, and how important do you think is the idea of personal branding when you're making a film? Like, I know there was a time, there are certain filmmakers who actually really don't put their films out there, don't tell anyone that they're making films, and they just keep making content. But according to me, the wise way to do this is that if you're making a film, it also has to be seen by people, right? You never really make work for yourself. Now that's where the idea of personal branding comes in, which is now tied very strongly to filmmaking, and how you put your work out there. What would you say about that?
Okay, again, I'll go back to what I do. Again, one of those very early classes where I take, I say, okay, you have come to learn filmmaking. There are two types of films. One is private films, the other is public films. Private films are the films that you make on your mobile, on whatever cameras that you have, and show it to the people who know you. So you can explain to them what the film is about, why you have made this, and even if it is not clear, you can tell them. The other kind of films are public films, which you make for people you don't know and people who don't know you. So there has to be a kind of a method, a language to be applied there for them to understand what you're trying to say. And that is the language of film, and how effectively you communicate whatever you're wanting to say is your expertise in filmmaking. So there is a kind of a very, very simple kind of a divide about making personal. If you take the public platform and try and make a personal statement, sorry, you are on the wrong platform.
I think my question is also about when you're putting your work out there,
Right.
the whole idea of now branding a film, marketing a film in a certain way, and your own personal branding now is something which is become a very important part of how a film is sometimes pitched. I mean, there's a whole army of people working sometimes behind, whether they're working on social media, getting the film out, getting people to know. Because it happens with me sometimes that people ask me what, so I tell them, my film is not on YouTube. It has only gone to festivals. And I get a earful from people like, why don't you put it just out there? I'm still holding on to that. So this is also a very personal question that I'm asking you. How does one build a sense of, putting your work out there and do some kind of, that's the idea of personal branding as well, because a lot of independent filmmakers get people to see their film. Like I know a lot of my colleagues whose work I would have never seen. My very good friend Abhay Kumar, whose film I would have never seen had it not been for the social media and the branding that he did on social media. Even if it reached, say, 100 people, at least some of us saw it. So how does one go about, that's a challenge in today's time, because a lot of content also means a lot of voices, a lot of social media. How does one deal with that?
I can just add one line before you.
Yes.
Speak. See, of course, personal branding is key, but filmmaking is first. Okay, the content is first. If the content is good, and then there is an important word called consistency. Consistency helps you to build the brand. So you may come out with one film and you can say it is me who has made the film. People will love it. Your dear ones would see it. But if you consistently produce or create interesting content, then you create a brand. So the personal branding follows the content and consistency. Otherwise, it will fall flat. So these are the three important aspects. One is content, which is the cinema or the creative content, what you make. Then is consistency. People give you a chance, and then comes the brand. So once you follow all this, people now follow, okay, such and such production house or such and such person, if he has released the video, I'll wait for it, or I want to see it. And that's where you build up that whole brand. That's how I see it. Sorry.
Exactly. I think you're
Absolutely
right.
right.
Can I say one thing also?
Yes.
I think some of, previously there was a classification as this is an art film, this is a commercial film. Fortunately, those lines have got blurred. But as Manish says, still there is a person. Now, if you say he makes a certain type of film, I would wait and see that film. Whereas maybe I don't like Karan Johar too much. So I may not wait to see a Karan Johar film. But that's my taste. There are lots of people who'll be waiting for Karan Johar's films to come out. So, you know that branding also helps you to watch a film. But again, given that you have an OTT platform where all the films are shown, I may watch a Karan Johar film for 15 minutes and say, bah, I don't like it. Or I may watch Manish's film and say, I like it or don't like it, or so whatever it is. So
In
it
fact,
gives
Manish
you,
himself is a brand.
yeah, he's a brand. So you see, you go to the OTT platform, it gives you that freedom to reject a film after 15 minutes or so, So the world changes that way,
Please, you want to speak.
See, when we say, when we utter the word brand, that itself means that there is business connected. So people who brand themselves in their films have business in mind, whatever kind of business. The business could be a very honest business. The business could be just to make money and have some, palatial kind of a house built for yourself and maybe a fancy car and things like that. Could be anything. So the end result is something that decides on your honesty, and honesty of the filmmaker is somewhere at the core of the kind of films which are being made by that person. And personally, I always look for that honesty in the filmmaker. If a filmmaker is being honest that, look, I want to make money and I'm creating a brand, okay, go ahead. Charlie Chaplin did that. Buster Keaton did that. He's an early filmmaker. George Méliès did that. There's a very interesting quote by a German filmmaker Werner Herzog. And he said that, look, why do we give this, film festivals and art films and analysis of films? He said the origin of films is in circus. It's not in painting. And he's so right around there, that, see, personally, I was part of all this. Geeta must have been part of that. Manish may have been part of that. There's this whole movement called Film Society movement, which tried to change the films around 60s, 70s, 80s. Of course, that kind of fizzled out later on because one could not make out the difference between, okay, the art film and the kind of. See, what was happening was the art filmmakers, many of the art filmmakers were commercial filmmakers. They knew where to market their films. They used to make their films, okay, I'm making this film for Berlin, I'm making this film for Cannes, I'm making this film for Venice. Even today, there are filmmakers who make their films. Nobody will see, there's no relevance of those films in today's Indian society. Those films are upheld by a few people. Branding. So it depends on which way you look at it. At the core, what I feel is, if you're honest that, look, I'm going to make a film for festival circuit, go make it. That's your market. But then it's as much of a business as making a film for, say, a Kannada audience in Bangalore.
I will just add one thing because it's very interesting because some of the students like your filmmaking students, how we believed in consistency at Drishyam Films and consistently making a cinema which we would know that people would look for and develop our own base in terms of customers, just to tell them as viewers, as customers. And we always thought that a decent film should be made within a budget of 5 crores. That was my thumb rule. Of course, we would go up and down 5-10% here and there. But I always said that if you believe in making a content which is consistent, and if you can find 500,000 to 100,000 people, 10 lakh log bhi agar aapki film ka wait karte hain pure India mein with a population of 130 crores, you get a box office of 10 crores. And imagining 100 rupees a ticket, and out of it 50%, let's say, comes a 5 crores are back. So if you believe in consistency and the budget, what you're talking of, a realistic budget to make an interesting film, and you have had a track record of making 5, 7, 8 films which people have loved. The one who has seen Aako Dekhi will see Masan, will see Newton, will see Dhanak, will see Ram Prasad Kitevi, and that's how you build a consistency. So what happens is you make a film which is economically viable from day one. That's number one. And number two, continue doing that without becoming greedy, making a budget, because films don't fail, it's the budget which fails. So make the same content, class content, with the clarity of budget, then that consistency and brand will play a role in making it economically viable so that you are never at a loss when you make a film. So we all say in film, as a producer, we always say, if I get my 90% money back and hundreds and thousands of claps and 1 or 2 awards, I think I've done a good job. That's how I look at it. And that's how consistency and branding plays an important role.
No, I think, Manish, what you're saying is extremely important, especially for the students here present here to listen to this, and also for filmmakers like my own self, because we often struggle with what? Ideas ki kami nahi hai hamare desh mein. To produce the ideas is a problem. Finding the right people who can produce your film, who can take it out there, that is a challenge. So you can make your private films and keep them at home with yourself, or you can try and, as Manish very clearly said, that where your bracket is, right? My film is, say, 4 crores. Then you need somebody to also, take the film forward. Who's going to do that for you? So consistency, I would also agree with Manish, is a very important point. However, consistency is different from personal branding, right? Because personal branding is Therefore, a result of consistency is what we are talking, which is a better way. And I think that's the lesson here in this conversation. Rather than personal branding being first and then consistency being later, it's important to, follow consistency with personal branding, because that's a very important point that you make. Since we have a lot of students here, I'm going to ask each one of you to, based on what we've just discussed, how can they empower themselves as creative people, as filmmakers, as good human beings who want to tell stories that make a difference and also have their films seen somehow? Anybody who would like to take this? Manish, would you like to go first on that? Or Niranjan, would you like to go first? I think you're looking at how many of your students are actually here.
Sorry, I'll take that question, then probably you'll get the cue. Basically, her question was how, because some of the students are here, that how do you think you can motivate those students or those people who are listening to feel empowered to make the films what they desire to make? It's very simple. That the point is, the world is open to see you, to watch your film. World is open. And in this 7 billion population, with one good content, even of 5 minutes or 7 minutes, you can win an Oscar. No matter what instrument you would have used, a DSLR camera or a mobile phone or a Sony camera or whatever. Go ideate, be brave enough to make your own film with your own funds. It may not cost you more than 10,000 rupees, to tell you sincerely, to make a decent 10 minutes film. And that 10 minutes film can change your world, change the world. And that's where the empowerment is. You have to feel that empowerment, that power of today's connected world, awakened audience and more accepting audience who are ready to see anything what comes across. And if you have an idea which you think is a brilliant idea, don't wait for it. Go ahead and make that film and show to the world, and upload it into Instagram, onto YouTube, on anywhere you want to do it, and people will take it forward from there. So film what you make. Another important thing which I want to communicate here is, once you make the film has its own journey. You can't hold it. It takes you places. You don't take films places. The film takes you to places. So when you create something, that creation has its own fate and its own journey. You can't stop it. It will go and you have to follow. That's how empowered we are.
I think that's really well
Manish,
said.
I think there's nothing more for me to say. I'll just say that if it is coming from a producer like Manish, I think it holds a lot of truth in it. Go ahead and just make what you want.
Like, we've been saying all through, the world is now your oyster. We're all interconnected. When we were all growing up, there were no cell phones, there were no internet and nothing. I remember the time that if I have to send, I used to live in Trivandrum in those days, and I used to write for Delhi newspapers. The only way that I could send an urgent thing, I have to go to the telegraph office. And with my telegraph card, I used to have to send the article to India Today or anything. Now, it's like today somebody sends me a WhatsApp message, and within about 10-15 minutes, I can have got that story. And if I don't have enough information, I can Google it. I can, put my article together on the computer and then directly send it. The whole process may take me only 1 hour from the moment I got the WhatsApp message to going. What we have to do is, sometimes for a person who is older, it's difficult to get hold of the technology properly. But I feel if we can, interconnect everything, your youth with with the technology and your ideas which are coming up, that would be fabulous. It would be also good if people with a lot of experience can also utilize this technology. So, everyone can use it and everyone can see it. And also, like you were saying, can it be more inclusive? As it is, I see more films which are talking about things which are so taboo in the old films. When you talk about caste, for instance, you only talked about the upper caste exploiting the lower caste. Nobody even looked at the lived in lives of them or of women or of any of the people who are marginalized, transgenders. Now, there are so many, I'm just saying the obvious things that people are talking about, but there are so many people who are marginalized. Their lives are so different from what is being projected in the old films. So now with all this, people can talk about their own lives. Like you don't need some filmmaker from Bombay to come and make a film about life in Bangalore. Anybody over here can make a film and project it to the whole world. And the whole world can see it and criticize you also. So there is, it's such an interconnected world. It's more difficult and it gives room for creativity. And there are so many different things. The opera, for instance, used to be theater. They all took a backseat when cinema became so famous. Now, the cinema of old time might again take a backseat before the OTT and internet and YouTube and online connection. So, world changes and you have to change with it. You're all young. There's a lot more of changes going to take place. And I think you have to swim with it, go along with it and, take full advantage of whatever's happening around you.
Thank you. I think that was absolutely fabulous, the advice.